teacher refuses to use trans pronouns or to bow down to LGBTQ altars. Temporarily suspended, a judge in Virginia ruled that not only does he get his job back, but the judge excoriated Loudoun, Virginia schools for being vindictive. Yes? Yes, they are. I'm Dr. Duke, and she's Katie. This is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness of packing K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. For more than 15 years, MyPillow has been producing the most comfortable pillows in the world, all American-made. In fact, they've sold over 40 million of those pillows. Beyond that, they also sell bed sheets and towels and bathrobes and dog beds and on and on and on, slippers and robes. Our Dr. Duke Show audience can get up to 66% off simply by using the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE, all one word. Go simply to mypillow.com and enter the code Dr. Duke, DRDUKE. Support a great American company, save a lot of money, and by supporting MyPillow, you're supporting this show. All right, today we start in Virginia, where has become the epicenter of education stupidity, even more so than Austin, Texas, more so than what's going on in California. Right now, Virginia, where all of those big big D.C. governor families are, all these big Washington politician money is overrunning Virginia, turning a once red state into a deep blue state, and education is how they're doing it. So we have on this very same Dr. Duke show a couple months ago, we called out moms and dads, but especially fathers. We made a plea for fathers, men, to stand up and defend their children, stand alongside their moms who are doing all the work. And now we have a fella who's done it. A fellow by the name of Byron Tanner Cross, who in the name of God and science really ripped into, again, Loudoun County, where all this nonsense is going. Let's just start by letting him have the first say.
My name is Tanner Cross, and I am speaking out of love for those who suffer with gender dysphoria. 60 Minutes this past Sunday interviewed over 30 young people who transitioned, but they felt led astray because lack of pushback or how easy it was to make physical changes to their bodies in just 3 months. They are now detransitioning. It's not my intention to hurt anyone, but there are certain truths that we must face when ready. We condemn school policies like 80-40 and 80-35 because it will damage children, defile the holy image of God. I love all of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
So Cross is an elementary physical education teacher, and he was speaking in front of the school board in his role as a citizen, but he was actually called to speak in front of the school board. We'll get to an update that's happening, but just so everyone's aware of what the policies are happening in Loudoun County. 8350, he says, and then 8040 he mentions as well. And so these policies, it states that staff shall allow gender-expansive and transgender students to 37 participate in such activities in a manner consistent with the student's gender identity. 8040 says, school staff shall, at the request of a student or a parent legal guardian, when using a name or pronoun to address a student, use the name and pronoun that correspond to their gender identity. The use of gender-neutral pronouns are appropriate, and it adds that inadvertent slips in the use of names or pronouns may occur. However, staff or students who intentionally and persistently refuse to respect a student's gender identity by using the wrong name and gender pronoun are in violation of this policy. Again, this is for an elementary school. So you're going to have the 5, 6, 7-year-olds telling these teachers that I go by XYZ pronoun and you must refer to me as XYZ, and maybe tomorrow I'm going to change from X to Z and then to Q and then an R. This is where we're at in our school system. And so Cross spoke out as a Christian father and teacher, and well, he got suspended.
It was really good to see a father up there, a father who was unapologetically asserting the rules of the faith in his God. That was really wonderful to see too. He said something else that I have not heard many other people talk about, and I'd like to pause on this for a moment. Talked about how easy it is to change human bodies now. That's something I think we have to look into. When you look at our culture, you look at just look at the 15-year run of superhero movies that have dominating kids' movies at the theater. The kids are sucking up these movies more than any other demographic, right? And what's one of the key features of these superhero movies? It is the malleability of the human body, right? The entire X-Men are quote unquote mutants, but when we say mutants, we don't think that they don't become ugly, slimy green things that look like slugs. They become superhuman, right? This idea that the changing of their bodies, some accident happens, some mutation takes place. They're somehow not normal. They're exceptional. And we see how these peewee runt young men like Peter Parker become the amazing Spider-Man, or what happens to the Hulk after he gets David Banner after he gets a little excited, right? He becomes this monstrous, powerful thing. It seems like our entire culture is geared towards this idea now of treating human bodies like these automobile shows where you pull an old car into a lot and these body workers do miracles, and then they turn the car back a week later and it's 10 times in value and completely remade. We're remaking homes and flipping them. You look at the entire culture, right? Everything can be made pretty. Everything can be made beautiful. Not to mention the endless array of 40-year-old Hollywood celebrities who've already had enough reconstructive face surgery to be unrecognizable. This is, I wonder to what degree, and Mr. Cross pointed that out, all this because it seems so duplicitly simple to change the human body, and no one really wants to talk about the deep, deep consequences of these kinds of radical surgeries.
And it's kind of interesting to note, considering for the past year we've all been masked up and covering everything up. It's just, think deeply about it. But for this story, we had said that he was suspended, right? So what happened is he had given that speech, and the Leesburg Elementary principal, Sean Lacey, informed parents, sent an email out to all the parents that Cross was put on administrative leave. And in the email, of course, it says, because it involves a personnel matter, I can offer no further information. But
he sent the email, sent a letter so everybody would know he was punished.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, we're putting him on administrative leave. He's been reassigned. His duties will be covered by substitute staff already in the building. So
I mean, think about that for a second. Otherwise, they don't even talk. If the media were to call up and say, "Hey, we want to ask you about what happened to Mr. Cross," they would say, "We can't talk about it's a personnel issue."
Yeah.
In this case, he sent a letter to every family to let them know he was undergoing personnel evaluation. Yeah, you think about this. In every other instance where a person is disciplined for not going along with the LGTB agenda, the school doesn't say a word about it. Reporters try to call the school. The school won't talk about it. All they'll say is, it's a personnel matter, we can't talk about it. But this principal mailed every single family to let them know that this guy who's so mean is undergoing a personnel punishment that we can't talk about. Think about that for a second. He wants to let them know, the principal, wink, we're on this. Even though we can't talk about it, I'm sending you all a letter to reassure you that if you're concerned about how evil and anti-trans this guy is, this personnel that I can't talk about issue, we've already got somebody else covering what he does. That's pretty insidious to me. And that's, I think, why the court in Virginia said you're vindictive. You are way more than just suspending him and investigating this.
Yeah, so what happened then is the update to the story is we have Judge James Plowman, who issued a temporary injunction against the school board in requiring it reinstate Cross as a gym teacher at the school through the end of December. And according to Plowman, he rejected the district's argument that they weren't properly served a lawsuit from Cross. And the parties then went on to argue whether or not the district was justified in suspending Cross with pay and banning him from any district property, including board meetings, for the, quote, disruptive impact caused by his 1-minute comment that you just listened to. Was that so...
And he was not under his working capacity then. He was just a public person. The judge also said when he spoke as a private citizen. You invite private citizens to do that. He has a stake in the school. And what I love about this is that the school tried to argue, like you said, that it was this terrible disruption. Where?
Yeah.
Who? Not a single person that we know Let's come forth. If there are dozens and dozens of trans kids who are absolutely mortified and can't leave their bedrooms now because of what Ms. Cross said, Mr. Cross said, where are their interviews?
Well, apparently there were 5 families who emailed in and said they did not want Mr. Cross
Teaching
anywhere near their children. You listen to what Mr. Cross said, and again, it was after hours. He was invited to speak. He was giving his position. And now he's so dangerous.
I guarantee you that what those 5 families really were appalled by was his overt Christianity. Remember, this is a suburb of Washington, D.C., the most anti-Christian place in the entire country outside of California, Los Angeles. And what you have there, I'm sure, is this idea, this radical idea that one of the reasons we love maneuvering pronouns, because it unmakes traditional values, particularly Christian biblical values. And so I'd love to see who those family members were. Stand up and own it, right? I mean, he said what he said publicly. You get up there and do the same thing. And heaven forbid, a debate might break out. Can't have one of those in a public school, can you?
So now saying that women have vaginas and that in general men are physically stronger may get you expelled. And at least in Scotland. It hasn't happened in the US yet, but I'm sure it's coming. We have a Scottish law student, Lisa Keogh, who is 29 years old, which is a key in this story. She's 29, meaning she's a little bit older than her counterparts. She's facing expulsion from Abertay University for telling her classmates, simple biology, just kind of pointing that out. So she said she made the comments about vaginas and physical strength during a video seminar, so it's all recorded. And the class lecturer muted her for daring to say this. That was red flag number 1 that something's going to happen to you.
Yeah, yes.
And her comments came as they were talking about the topic of men who identify as female taking part in mixed martial arts matches. Okay? Physical contact, body strength. And so she said, she pointed out to the class that not only that women have female body parts, but also in this scenario, if you had a trans athlete, had testosterone in her body for 32 years, and then as such would be genetically stronger than your average woman, meaning you're a guy for 32 years and then you go up against a woman, biologically,
we have evidence.
You will be stronger. We have common sense facts.
We have mixed martial arts evidence of a man who quote unquote transitioned to a woman, pumped himself full of estrogen, and broke the jaws in like 5 seconds of the women he fought. It was not even a competition. It was abuse.
Yes. So because she stated that, just as you stated it, she is now accused of calling women the weaker sex, and for having the gall to stand up for men after one of her classmates indicated that all men are rapists.
Well, all men are rapists. That's not a problem.
That's okay. Yeah. And they pose a danger to women. But
men are toxic. That's okay. That flies.
Yes, but here's what that can fly. They're more offended by what she then said was that her anti-men classmates are man-hating feminists.
Yep. Well, she's right about that, too.
She's right, and so therefore she's wrong.
So what this is again, speaking of the word vindictive, this is a classroom of law students who ought to know, but these aren't 20-year-olds. These are law students in their mid to late 20s who are going to be practicing at the bar, God help us. So this is when the judge in Virginia said of our last story, not only are you illegally doing this, you are behaving vindictively. How dare you? And notice what the middle syllable of the word vindictive is. How dare you come down on that side of things when this is all about hating on the men?
Well, most of her classmates are younger than her, so they don't understand what it means to be around for time before any of this nonsense infiltrated everything they do. And she says, and she's a mother of 2, she says she wants to be a human rights attorney. She says, I'm worried that my chance of becoming a lawyer and making a positive contribution could be ended just because some people were offended.
Yep.
Those girls fresh out of high school who accuse me are training to be lawyers. There are no trigger warnings in a courtroom. The judge isn't going to whisper softly or excuse them from listening to things they may not want to hear.
And they don't get to make statement like all men are rapists and have nobody challenge that, because you got to provide proof in a courtroom, baby. These little women studies snowflakes, women studies snowflakes snowflakes with Scottish accents.
jeez.
It just runs. You know me, how I like to imitate badly.
Unfortunately,
languages,
yes.
so I'm not going to do it. But to hear the Scottish tongue warped in the service of gender fascism, it's just as creepy.
We actually have some good news. Huzzah. We have a professor who actually fought the system and won.
I fought the law and the
knew it was
law
gonna
won. I fought the law and the law won.
So, it was a unanimous 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decided to side with Shawnee State University philosophy professor, there he is, Nicholas Merriweather, in his battle against the university for violating his free speech and free exercise of religion.
Way to go, 6. Way to go, 6th Circuit, baby. Woo! 6.
So the school had mandated the use of terms that conflict with biology, general knowledge, and in doing so, it then violated Merriweather's religious belief that gender is fixed from the moment of conception. So it was a 32-page decision. Judge Amul Thapar wrote, "The First Amendment interests are especially strong here because Merriweather's speech also relates to his core religious and philosophical beliefs." Excellent. He also added that if professors lacked free speech protections when teaching, a university would wield alarming power to compel ideological conformity. A university president could require a pacifist to declare that war is just, a civil rights icon to condemn the Freedom Riders, a believer to deny the existence of God, or a Soviet emigre to address his students as comrades. That cannot be.
Excellent.
I love
that.
Excellent statement.
It takes
in the
obviously somebody whose ancestry is not American to come over here and point out to idiot American professors that you can't just do this.
Well, and on top of it, the university, by they were mandating this or whatever, they had no proof of Merriweather's decision not to use feminine pronouns and how that would affect
that's
his
right.
job.
He
They
just
had no
avoids them,
proof. Yeah.
which is the way to handle this. Look, my attitude is that whatever name you want to be called, knock yourself out. You want to give yourself a nickname? We do that all the time. You want to come up with some catchy little nickname? Fine. But there's no reason I have to refer to you by any pronouns whatsoever, nor can you force pronouns from me. There's just not necessary. So the fact that you aren't happy with those kinds of compromises, I know this professor from reading the story. He had no if they altered their name, that's fine. But it's the requirement to undercut a basic form of English grammar to serve the distorted needs of attention-seeking little trans hoes.
Okay. And on top of it, the Jane Doe student that this is going off, it didn't affect Jane Doe's grade whatsoever. It's not like he was targeting her to purposely do anything. Whereas in some instances, being in classrooms, if you don't toe the line, if the professor disagrees with you on anything, they may affect your grade.
Like we just saw in Scotland here, right?
That's true.
Just as we saw in the story about Scotland, where a group of just graduated women's studies morons decided that they were going to be all about talking about all men are rapists. When the student pointed out all women have vaginas, well, that was unacceptable, right? So it's the double standard in this, I think, is what the courts are going to see all the time. The double standard about how the left can get away with those kinds of reinventions of every aspect of biology, every aspect of culture. But when it comes to the other side, they are constricted to absolutely conform to what their academic betters are telling them they must do. And it's not a fair system. Even in places like Scotland, where you don't have the kind of protections for speech like you do in America, it's an obvious case of foolishness. And our friend here won. And this professor, and as the article points out, and as you presented it, this is not good for the transgender movement. Again and again and again, when it gets to, because the homosexual revolution we went through 20 years ago did not have these same kind of stipulations. You didn't have to change language. You didn't have to get rid of the words mother and father to please this organization. You didn't have to argue that biology was not a thing anymore. With the move to the trans, this is a whole nother ball of wax. It's time for some real education and a day spent talking about people fighting, literally fighting over the idea that men can't be women and vice versa. Let's hear from a real man in every sense of the word, the immortal words of Ronald Reagan, Ronaldus Magnus, the 40th president of the United States. Yes, it is Ronald Reagan Week, Ronald Reagan Week on the Dr. Duke Show. It is the Ronald Reagan Week on the Dr. Duke Show, the 40th president of the United States, born in 1911, died in 2004. Let's just listen to some of the wit and the wisdom of Reagan, a guy who understood what was real and what was not. Take a look at the first quote we have today. We don't have $1 trillion debt because we haven't taxed enough. We have $1 trillion debt because we spend too much. Oh, can we just brand that on the forehead of every Republican and every Democrat politician in Washington right now? I mean, that's exactly right. What is Biden's response to $8 trillion in debt? $8 more trillion in debt. And the argument Biden and his liberal colleagues make is that we don't try. The reason we don't have any money is we don't tax you enough. Well, you just raised $8 trillion in future taxes, and you're going to double that. Go back to what Mr. Reagan said. Our problem is absolutely not that we haven't taxed enough. We have $1 trillion debt because we spend too much. How about this? Quote, we must reject the idea that every time a law's broken, society is guilty. Hello, Antifa. Hello, Black Lives Matter. We must reject the idea that every time a law is broken, society is guilty rather than the lawbreaker. It is time to restore the American precept that each individual is accountable for his actions. You burn down a police station, however nice you think your cause is, you ought to spend 20 years in jail for arson. You throw rocks at cops and knock one out who's simply trying to do his job and arrest a man with a gun in your neighborhood, you should spend 10 years in jail for violently obstructing the police in doing their jobs. Stop blaming everybody on your own fault. How about this one? A nation that cannot control its borders is not a nation. One thing I love about Ronald Reagan, it doesn't take him more than pithy sentences and very, very simple words to tell such great truths. A nation that cannot control its border is not a nation. That means we are no longer a nation. How about this one? Heroes may not be braver than anyone else. They're just braver 5 minutes longer. Isn't that great? That we're all brave or not brave to a certain point. But what makes an actual hero is during the 5 minutes of tragedy or heartache or danger, that person stays brave just that extra 5 minutes. And how about this one? Government's view of the economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it. Beauty, pure beauty, absolute correct beauty.
All right, those are the stories for today. If you have a question for us, please feel free to drop it in the mailbag by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org. And if you enjoy our content, please consider joining our Patriot Club. Your one-time $99 tax-deductible donation allows Duke and I to keep bringing you the stories every day. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And of course, we will give you a signature tumbler as a thank you.
And that's going to do it for this show. There's always another one coming tomorrow. I'm Dr. Duke, will be so tomorrow. She's Katie, and she'll be Katie as well, because we're not malleable.